Continuing the epistemological aspects behind the English grammar, the fifth topic. When we open a dictionary and look at the list of words and their meanings, we are more precisely in front of a set of general and classificatory properties present in each one of them. For example, the word boy is animate, human, male, young, or as many more as it is convenient to stipulate for the understanding of a term. So when we want to know the meaning of a word, we have some other basic concepts to help us to identify what means that word. Like, for example, boy. We are talking about a being alive, an alive being. He's supposed to be a human. And of course, sometimes some people might use this word to represent a dog or a cat. Male. We have the idea what means to be a male and young, which is not so old. All this seems obvious and naturally accepted until we realize that there is an inherent problem. To talk about it, we must first understand the difference between formal grammar and notational grammar. The first assumes that the correct way of speaking definition of grammar is given by a set of arbitrary and coherent rules in order to define a system that would lead us to the disambiguation of linguistic expression. The second prescribes that, in fact, there must be a natural and therefore general classifications to all languages, such as the fact that there are nouns, adjectives, verbs, phrases, questions, etc. In other words, the formal one would be decided by a group, while the notational one would be intuitive and given by nature, at least about some very basic concepts. So we have this difference too, concerning that difference that we have seen before, about whether the language has been created by man or it has been given to us by some extraordinary force or simply mother nature. The question is, are the two grammars mutually exclusive? It is easy to see that it would be impossible to make formal grammatical decisions without the aid of a so-called semantic apparatus, that is, one that concerns the meaning of things as given in the world, the notational. For example, how to decide on the relative pronoun who instead of which or that in the sentence the boy who. When we try to say the boy who was speaking to me is ugly. Why do we have to decide to use the WH who instead of which or that to represent that we are talking about a person, right? If we didn't already know that a boy is normally human and therefore should use who or whom if we are talking about the object of the phrase and not which. Also, how can we not say that child is inanimate just because we use its possessive meaning of the thing and not his or her? As when we are talking about children, for example, a child is neither a man or a woman. And in the English grammar, curiously, we talk about children like if they were things. In the sentence, the child ate its food. Of course, you can already decide whether you are talking about a boy or a girl, but technically they aren't men or women yet. So you can literally say that the children are things. And English grammar can be very weird sometimes, very literal, very cold. And like, for example, people don't like when we say that when the animal doesn't have a family, we have to consider the animals like things too. Same things for children. In the first case, we have to resort to creating the concept that a human can be reduced to an abstract referential element, the same way that a child is gender neutral. So a child that doesn't have a gender yet. This is not relevant for a child yet. Remember that the children have only to study and to play. That's it. We note then that the form content opposition, we have this classical opposition, this contradiction, this dichotomy, form and content, is not a matter of self exclusion, and it would be impossible to have grammar without meanings and meanings without a grammar for us to know what and how we are understanding something. This reminds us about the things that we have seen in the previous videos about the fact that, like for example, without meanings and meanings without a grammar, we have that paradox. When did we really start to learn our language? How is it possible to learn a language without the language, right? So to have grammar without meanings and meanings without a grammar, it seems that they are mutual helpful to each other, and it's kind of paradoxical to try to differentiate them one from another while they actually help each other. But to decide what is the point of the beginning of these things, it's kind of hard to say, right? It is customary to think and believe that the greater the age and level of life experience, the wiser a person becomes. One would rarely think that there is some kind of miracle whereby, with just reading a book, a page, or even a paragraph, perhaps even a divine revelation or instant download, if we are talking about something in the future, if you are hearing this video 100 years after I have recorded this one, maybe this could be something normal to you, right? If you want to learn how to fight karate, you would just download like the Matrix movies, right? Yes, maybe time wouldn't be so important after all to learn things. It depends on the technology that you are using to understand things, right? One would know everything there is to know. In fact, this reasoning already fails in advance when it is impossible to determine even the starting point of the construction of such obligatory knowledge. In any case, at least for the practice of life, human knowledge suffers unwanted interference for the very elements to be known. So, again, that paradox. When you want to learn something, the fact that you are trying to learn this something is already changing this something that you want to learn. This is a paradox that physics is seeing nowadays, right? I don't remember the formal name right now, but it's a paradox that when you try to observe the electron, for example, it already changes its form, its velocity, and you will never see the electron how it was originally because the attempt to see it already changed it. So this is a very problematic epistemological thing, right? Maybe we cannot know anything in this world because when we try to see it, when we try to perceive it, we are already changing it. So we will never know what it was originally. A good example of this is the irregular nouns. Like the plural of child is children. The superlative good is best. And the simple past of go is went. We have already seen that this irregularity comes from contingent aspects of human practice and not by chance removes universal traits from language that would make it closer to the ideal. Metaphysically interesting, right? And easier to learn, epistemologically convenient. So people might ask why in the hell a child has become children. Good, best, go, went. These are not philosophical facts, right? We would say that these are linguistic facts. These changes, these problems of the irregular words are contingent to the human history. Maybe some folks around here like to transform the conjugation of the verb like this, and some other folks from this place wanted to do like that. Sometimes they had to make an agreement to decide what would it be, the simple past or the simple or the participle of a word. So this is not interesting for us, not philosophically speaking, right? But it's interesting to know that these are contingent facts of the human reality. When we observe children developing language, however, we see that they remain at a much more coherent logical level than the adult who was infected by the a posteriori aspect of the human needs. The difference between morpheme and morph, this is very interesting, reveals this interesting fact. The form of expression concerns its meaning, while its substance refers to the mode of presentation, which is supposed to be like written, spoken, gesture. So we have this difference. The substance, the way that you are conveying your information, and the form of the expression concerns its meaning. So morpheme is to form what morph is to substance. We have this relationship: morpheme, form; morph, substance. It is natural for a child to try to use child's or goodest and good instead of the above forms, because it's more logical to deal with morphemes, fixed meanings, than with the arbitrary substances of morphs, since every morph refers to a morpheme, but not every morpheme can be analyzed or seen in a morph. So, for example, boys has two morphemes and two morphs, boy and ass, but went has two morphemes because we know the meanings behind went. We are talking about the verb go and the simple past of it, which is normally in regular forms ended by ed. So we have two morphemes. We have two notions inside the word went, but we cannot separate it in anything whatsoever. There's no radical for this thing. There's no part in the word went. And no morphs. We don't have parts. We don't have morphs. Can we conclude that a child can be more coherent than an adult due to his lack of experience in the world? So, for those who believe that the more you live, the more things you hear or learn make you more logical, more experienced, and more intelligent or wiser. Maybe you might be wrong, because the children trying to use these rules, these supposed to be wrong rules, they can be considered more coherent, more logical than you guys who have been infected by the experience, the contingent rules of the world. Like, for example, I want to speak like everyone else because I want to be accepted by this society. So I would never try to invent anything or try to respect the logic or some other things that might be more coherent, but they are not useful for your human and pragmatical dynamics, right? 8. It has long been thought that language has been created only for describing objects and events in the world. However, with the creation of the theory of speech acts, it was realized that there were actions in the world that only occurred through language and through no other means. For example, a child's baptism, a marriage war declaration, or a building inauguration. With this, it was established that linguistic judgments did not merely remain the field of very conditionality. That is, they were not just true or false. In fact, statements of this type were only in one of the 5 categories of possible forms of expression, or linguistic acts like we have seen before. No? Affirmations, promises, orders, declarations, and expressions of your mental states. In views of this, we needed to develop new verbs that dealt with objects or events that could not fit in the past or present tense, which is a very recent past. The present is a very recent past. Because only about then could we say that they are or are not something. So we are talking about the modal verbs. Not everything is about things that we can judge right now, whether this is true or false. This is the idea behind modal verbs. Modal verbs in English illustrate this need well. Will, for example, is a noun that means disposition for doing something. But by grammatical class conversion, it has come to be used as a modal verb to refer to future actions. Of course, we cannot say of what has not yet occurred whether it is true or false. If something hasn't occurred, we cannot say whether this is true or false. Similarly, verbs with the connotation of possibility, which also refer to the future, such as can, could, may, might, are also modal. Verbs like need, should, or ought to, in addition to talking about the future, bring an idea of directiveness. A request, a recommendation, or an order cannot be true or false, but can only be obeyed or not. So, possibility and necessity. Since Aristotle, these are the basic concepts behind the modal idea of expression. Things that you cannot classify as true or false because either you cannot say something about this because this is in the future, or there's no point in saying that this is true or false because I just want you to obey me or not. So that's why we have the possibility and the necessity, directiveness. And this is an order, for example. Finally, it is worth remembering a very important rule of English grammar, which says that verbs cannot be conjugated after using modals. And that makes perfect sense. Conjugation is an inflection of the action in relation to the tension of time, hence verb tense. And as we only have access to the past records and the present living itself, judgments about the future using modals are therefore inflexible. This also explains something about the four aspects of the verb that we have: simple, perfect, continuous, and perfect continuous. The four aspects. All of them treat just about past and present, and when one uses them concerning the future, she will have a child tomorrow, for example. Actually, one is speaking, she will have a child when tomorrow come, without the s, by the way, because we are talking about the subjunctive right now. Come without the s, because one cannot talk in the indicative mood in a prediction. How could I make a prediction knowing what will happen? This is not a prediction, right? This is just a statement about the true reality. When you try to make a prediction, like the first condition, like we have seen, you have to use the subjunctive, which is an idea of present subjunctive, after all. So, even when I try to make a prediction like this, and she will have a child tomorrow, I'm actually saying something like this: she will have a child when tomorrow comes. Right? So that's why we cannot conjugate the verbs after modals, because conjugation is about the relationship between a subject and the verb that he or she is doing. But future actions are not proper or real things. They are things that are in the future. The future doesn't exist yet. So how could you conjugate a verb if neither the subject, neither the verb correspondent to this subject exists? So you cannot conjugate them. That's why you cannot use any other form outside the basis form of the verb. One last topic about epistemology is the subject about subordination. The grammar has decided that a clause is a subordinate one if it doesn't have a complete meaning on its own. For example, can you tell me? It seems that we need an additional content to complete the meaning of this entire phrase, right? We ask ourselves, what do we want to know? We need the rest of the phrase. For now, this seems a pretty good definition because the contrary situation, the coordinate clause, like for example, the sun came out, seems to picture a clause with a complete meaning. But is it really that obvious? Is it really that obvious that this is complete? We could perfectly think of the subordinate case that one simply doesn't want to know what he wanted to know previously. He just gave up. Like, for example, can you tell me, you know what, I don't want to know anymore. Why is this an incomplete thing? If I wanted to express that I have given up on my curiosity, do I have a complete meaning of my phrase, can you tell me? The meaning is, I was trying to make a question about something, but I have given up. The meaning is complete, right? Also, we could ask about the coordinate clause. Which hour, where, or for how long did the sun come out? And turn it into a subordinate clause. The grammar has decided that if you feel that you need further information to understand something, the clause is a subordinate one. But with these examples, we cannot be so sure about this anymore, right? Actually, if you remember correctly, this relationship and this difference between coordinate and subordinate are directly related to the problem with the verbs, what we call the whether it needs a direct object or indirect object. We are talking about the transitivity of the verbs. Like, for example, who tells something? Who tells something, right? You have to tell me something. So we would say that this is a verb. It is transitive and it needs a direct object because who tells something. We can say also that it is bitransitive, like who tells something to someone. Or I could simply say to you that this is intransitive too. I tell. I don't have to tell you what I tell. I'm trying just to say to you that I have the capacity of telling people something. I tell. I don't have to say you what I can tell, but I'm able to tell something. So this would be the intransitive use of the verb. So all the things that we have learned at school, they are wrong. It depends on the context that you are using, your illocutionary point, the objective of your phrase. This ends the epistemologic topic. For the last one, we have the pragmatic aspects of language and how it has interfered in some grammar decisions of English. So, see you next video to finally start the last topic, how pragmatics are important to decide the English grammar rules. Bye bye.